The world was drowning in its own cruelty. Every street corner held a new conflict. Every marketplace echoed with the sounds of betrayal and unchecked malice. People lived for the moment, ignoring the rot spreading beneath their feet. In the center of this chaos stood Noah. He did not participate in the violence. He did not join the chorus of the wicked. He simply existed as a silent, immovable object against a rushing current. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It was not a sound, but a sudden, absolute cessation of the world's noise. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. A command cut through the stillness, precise and undeniable. Noah, the end is coming. A flood will cover the entire earth. Build an ark, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high. Take your family. Take 2 of every creature, and prepare. The instruction hung in the air, defying every law of nature. There was no ocean in sight. There was no rain in the forecast. Noah did not look for a witness. He reached down, gripped the handle of his heavy iron saw, and drove the blade into the timber. The work had begun. The first year was the hardest. The wood was dense, the grain stubborn, and the sun beat down on the construction site without mercy. Noah's hands calloused, turning thick and hard as the timber he shaped. His sons grew taller, their muscles hardening as they hauled massive beams into place. Every day, the neighbors gathered at the edge of the clearing. They did not come to help. They came to watch the spectacle of a man building a ship in a desert. "Noah, where is the water?" one would shout, followed by a chorus of jeers. "Maybe the rain will come from your sweat," another mocked. 10 years passed, then 20. The ark rose higher, a skeletal giant against the horizon. 50 years of labor. The sky remained a relentless, mocking blue. Not a single cloud drifted by to offer a shadow. Noah's wife brought him water and bread, her eyes scanning the empty horizon just as his did. She placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Still, Noah drove the iron nails into the wood. He did not look at the crowd. He kept his eyes on the grain of the wood and the rhythm of the hammer. 100 years of labor culminated in a single, silent morning. The ark stood finished, a massive, windowless monument of timber. The neighbors had gathered as usual, ready with their sharp tongues and practiced insults. Then, the horizon shifted. A low rumble vibrated through the soles of their feet, not from the earth, but from the distance. From the north, a pair of lions emerged, their manes matted with dust, moving with a singular, focused intent. From the south, elephants thundered, their trunks swaying in perfect unison. Eagles circled above, their cries piercing the stagnant air before descending toward the structure. There were no handlers, no ropes, no whips. Every creature that walked, crawled, or flew moved in pairs, a relentless, living tide flowing toward the ark. The laughter at the fence line faltered. One man stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. Another dropped his drink, the glass shattering against the dry earth. But the sound was swallowed by the heavy, rhythmic thud of thousands of hooves and paws. The jeering stopped entirely. A heavy, suffocating silence descended. Noah stepped across the threshold, his wife and sons following close behind. He looked back one last time at the sun-baked earth, then turned to face the vast, dark interior of the vessel. He did not reach for the heavy timber door. He did not pull the latch. The door moved on its own, swinging shut with a final booming thud that echoed across the valley. A heavy beam slid into place from the outside, locking them in. The crowd outside stood frozen, staring at the solid wall of wood. They waited for a shout, a command, or a sign of life from within. Nothing came. The silence was absolute. The first day passed in a blur of confusion. The second day brought whispers of madness. By the third day, the mockery returned, thin and brittle. "See? Nothing!" a voice cried out, but the sound lacked conviction. The neighbors paced the perimeter, their eyes darting to the cloudless sky, then back to the sealed door. Day 4, day 5. The heat intensified, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Still, no rain, no wind, no change. On the 6th day, the crowd grew restless, their laughter replaced by an uneasy, jagged tension. On the 7th day, the world held its breath. The seventh day did not end with sunset. It ended with a single, heavy drop of water hitting the dust. It left a dark, circular stain on the parched ground, then another, and another. The sky did not darken gradually. It tore open in a jagged, violent flash of light. A roar, deeper than thunder, shook the valley floor. The ground beneath the feet of the crowd began to heave. Cracks spider-webbed across the earth, and from these jagged fissures, water erupted with the force of a geyser. It was not just rain falling from above. It was the earth itself turning inside out. Rivers that had been bone dry for years suddenly surged, their banks obliterated by a wall of churning brown sludge. The air became a solid sheet of water, blinding and cold. Trees snapped like twigs under the sudden, immense pressure of the rising tide. The dry land vanished in seconds, replaced by a swirling, chaotic expanse. The roar grew into a deafening, continuous scream of wind and rushing water, drowning out all other sound. The sky and the earth had become one. The panic was instantaneous. People scrambled for the higher ground, their feet slipping on the slick, mud-choked slopes. They looked back, but the valley was already gone, swallowed by a churning, dark expanse. The water rose with terrifying speed, claiming the lowlands and then the foothills. Families abandoned their homes, running blindly toward the only structure that remained above the tide. They reached the ark, their hands raw and bleeding as they pounded against the massive, unyielding timber. "Noah, open the door, please, let us in." Their screams were thin, fragile things lost against the relentless roar of the deluge. The wood did not vibrate. It did not groan. It remained silent, a tomb of safety locked from the outside. The water reached their waists, then their chests. One by one, they were swept away into the black, swirling abyss. The mountains themselves began to vanish, their jagged peaks disappearing beneath the rising surface. The world was no longer land and sky, but a singular, suffocating ocean. The last light of the sun flickered and died, leaving the earth in a cold, absolute darkness. Inside the ark, the world had shrunk to the sound of breathing and the rhythmic creak of timber. 150 days of drifting, no horizon, no wind, just the heavy, humid air trapped within the walls. Noah moved through the stalls, checking the animals, his hands tracing the rough grain of the wood. The water had finally stopped its relentless push against the hull. He climbed to the upper hatch, his movements slow and deliberate. He pushed the heavy frame aside, letting in a sliver of stagnant, gray light. He reached into the cage and brought out the dove. Its heart beat rapidly against his palm. He held it up to the opening, his fingers trembling, and released it. The bird circled once, twice, then vanished into the gray expanse. Hours stretched into an eternity of waiting. The silence was absolute. Then, a soft fluttering against the wood. Noah reached out. The bird landed on his wrist, its wings damp and heavy. In its beak, it held a single fresh olive leaf. Noah sank to the floor, his grip tightening around the small branch. The water was receding. The earth was breathing again. The long wait was finally breaking. 7 days passed in a blur of anticipation. Noah released the dove once more, watching it disappear toward the horizon. He waited by the hatch, his eyes fixed on the empty sky. The sun climbed, peaked, and set. The bird did not return. A profound stillness settled over the ark. Noah knew. He moved to the main door, his hands finding the heavy latch. He pushed. The wood groaned, protesting the movement, before swinging wide. A rush of air hit him crisp, clean. He stepped out, his boots sinking into the soft, saturated mud of the mountainside. The light was blinding. He stood there, chest heaving, taking in the vast, silent landscape. The world was scarred, but it was solid. He knelt, his fingers digging into the grit, and began to gather stones. One by one, he stacked them. He placed the final stone, stood back, and looked up at the sky. The silence felt like a blessing. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of damp earth and new growth. God spoke, his voice resonating through the stillness of the mountain peak. Never again will water destroy all life. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest will never cease. Day and night will never end. Noah stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the clouds began to break. A sliver of light pierced the gloom, refracting into a brilliant arc of color that stretched across the sky. It was the first rainbow in human history, a vivid bridge of light against the retreating storm. Noah watched the colors deepen, a silent promise written in the heavens. The people who once laughed at the sight of the ark were gone, buried by the very tide they ignored. But the earth remained. You are here today because one man chose to believe when the world saw only madness. He built when others mocked. He waited when others despaired. His life serves as a testament to the power of conviction against the pressure of the crowd. Every story has a beginning, but the greatest ones leave a mark that lasts for generations. Subscribe to Epic Bible Stories. Experience the greatest narratives ever told, brought to life right here. Remember the lesson of the ark. When the world doubts, stand firm in what you know to be true.